Hey there, welcome. Let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever felt like a woman was disrespecting you, but in a way so subtle, so indirect, that you weren't even sure if it was disrespect or if you were just imagining it? Maybe it was a glance, a sarcastic comment, a dismissive tone, or a little jab disguised as a joke. Something felt off, something didn't sit right, but calling it out, that felt like overreacting. And if you're a woman watching this, maybe you've seen this from the other side. Maybe you've said something that seemed harmless and suddenly the guy you're with shut down, pulled away, or snapped back, and you had no idea what just happened. Here's the core issue. Disrespect doesn't always come in loud, obvious ways. Most of the time, it creeps in quietly, almost invisibly, and by the time it becomes a real problem, it's already rooted itself deep in the relationship. So in today's video, we're diving into a topic that doesn't get talked about enough, but affects almost everyone. How to recognize and deal with subtle disrespect from women, especially in relationships, before it grows into something bigger. Let's start here. Disrespect is usually a process, not a single moment. It starts small, quiet. You might not even notice it first, but it builds. And unless you catch it early, it almost always escalates. Think of it like this. The best predictor of open disrespect is covert disrespect. Those small jabs, passive-aggressive tones, and micro-behaviors that give just enough plausible deniability to avoid confrontation. Now, to understand how this works in real life, let's look at two environments where power dynamics are constantly being tested: high schools and prisons. In those places, people don't usually walk up and throw a punch right away. That's risky. If they pick the wrong target, someone who fights back hard, it can get messy fast. So instead, they run a test. A subtle one. For example, walking down a hallway and accidentally bumping into someone. Now, was that an accident? Maybe. It could be. But it could also be a calculated move, because how that person responds says a lot. If the guy who got bumped says, "Oh, sorry," and just shrugs it off, then boom, he just failed the test. He's now a potential target. On the other hand, if the person being bumped turns around, stares back, or calmly says, "Watch where you're going," the whole vibe shifts. The person who initiated the bump might laugh it off and say, "Chill out, man." But internally, he's reevaluating. That guy's not an easy mark. Now here's where it connects to relationships. Women can sometimes test boundaries without even realizing it. And in fairness, men can too, but today we're focusing on female-to-male disrespect, especially the kind that starts subtly. And I want to be really clear here. This isn't about women being bad or manipulative. In fact, I believe most women who show covert disrespect don't actually know they're doing it. Why? Because men and women often define respect differently. Let's take a pause here for a second and give the women in the audience a simple test, a practical one. Here it is. Before you say or do something to your man, ask yourself this: would I do or say this to my boss if I really wanted to keep my job? Now let's walk through some examples. Would you roll your eyes at your boss in a meeting? Would you dismiss your boss's feedback with a sarcastic reply? Would you complain loudly every time your boss asked you to do something? Would you nag your boss repeatedly to change how he does things? Would you talk badly about your boss to your coworkers behind his back? Would you mutter under your breath while your boss is speaking? Would you tease or mock your boss publicly in front of others? Would you act completely disinterested or indifferent when your boss shared an idea? I'm guessing the answer to most of those is a hard no. Because if you value your job, you know that kind of behavior would damage your professional image or even get you fired. Now, some people might say, "Well, actually, I do joke around with my boss. We have a fun relationship." Okay, but here's the real test. Would you act that way around your boss if clients or higher-ups were in the room? Probably not. Why? Because you know how it would look to outsiders who don't understand your dynamic. You know there are boundaries, expectations, consequences, which proves the point. You understand how respect works in a hierarchy, even a friendly one. Now, let's tackle a common objection. But wait, my boyfriend or husband isn't my boss. True, he's not. You're not under him. He doesn't control you. You're in a voluntary, mutual relationship, just like a professional contract. You both agree to terms. You both bring value. But here's the thing. In many relationships, especially heterosexual ones, men are usually the ones making the offer. They build the ship and invite the woman aboard. They make the pitch. Here's what my life looks like. Want to join me? Now, that's not always the case, of course, but it's common enough that it shapes the dynamic. So if the man is building the frame, or the ship, if we keep using the metaphor, then he's essentially functioning as the captain. And if that's the case, he needs cooperation. He needs respect. Otherwise, the whole ship falls apart. Still not convinced? Try flipping the script. Why would your boss deserve more respect from you than the person you share your life with? Why is your professional reputation more important than the emotional safety of your relationship? If you wouldn't treat your boss like that, but you treat your partner that way, what message does that send? It says, this job is more valuable to me than this relationship. And hey, maybe that's the truth. And if so, fine, be honest. But if that's not what you want to communicate, then it's time to take a closer look at the behaviors you're bringing into your relationship.
So, why is this such a big deal? Why is disrespect from women, especially the subtle kind, so damaging, not just for the relationship, but for the woman herself? Let's get into it. There are two main reasons why covert disrespect becomes a ticking time bomb in romantic relationships. First, a man with self-respect and options won't tolerate it. A man who knows his value, who understands that he brings something meaningful to the table, is not going to stick around long if he feels like he's constantly being undermined, belittled, or dismissed, especially if he has options, especially if he's operating from a place of abundance instead of desperation. See, here's the deal. Men today are more aware than ever of dynamics in dating and relationships. A lot of them have been burned before. A lot of them have gone through situations where they felt unappreciated, emasculated, or emotionally used. So, when they recognize the early signs of disrespect, those eye rolls, passive digs, or contempt masked as jokes, they're more likely to bounce. Not because they're fragile, not because they can't take criticism, but because they've learned the hard way what happens when they don't draw the line early. Now, sure, some guys ignore it, some stay silent, some just put up with it because they're afraid to rock the boat. But here's what often happens next. Resentment builds, attraction fades, and eventually the relationship becomes hollow. No connection, no passion, just two people walking on eggshells going through the motions. So, for women watching this, if you're wondering why a good man pulled away, even when things seemed fine on the surface, this might be why. And for the men, if you don't speak up early, if you let small things slide because it's not worth a fight, just know you're silently giving permission for the behavior to continue. And it will. Now let's talk about the second reason this matters, and this one's going to hit a little deeper. A woman cannot love a man she does not respect. Let me say that again, because it's key to everything else in this video. A woman cannot truly love a man she does not respect. This is one of the core differences between how men and women operate emotionally. A man can love a woman he doesn't respect. We've seen it. It happens all the time. He might be physically attracted to her, he might have a sense of duty or obligation, or he might just not know how to leave. But the point is, respect isn't always a requirement for men to feel love. But for women, respect and love are directly connected. When a woman respects her man, love flows easily. She's drawn to him. She trusts him. She feels safe letting go and opening up emotionally. But when that respect disappears, when it erodes over time because of unresolved tension, emotional weakness, or lack of boundaries, her feelings follow. And here's the twist. Sometimes the disrespect starts as a test. She's not trying to be mean, she's testing the frame. Can this man hold his ground? Will he call me out when I step out of line? Can I trust him to be the emotional anchor when things get chaotic? And if the answer is no, if he avoids conflict, stays silent, or just puts up with it because it's not worth a fight, then ironically, her safety with him decreases. Because now she's in charge. Now she has to lead. And for most women, especially in romantic dynamics, that's exhausting. Over time, her attraction drops, her tone gets sharper, she nitpicks more, she becomes colder, more distant, and maybe she doesn't even know why. But it all traces back to one thing: the loss of respect. So, what's the solution? How do you stop covert disrespect before it turns into full-blown contempt? Here's the key. You have to catch it early and call it out. Calmly, but firmly. Let's say your partner makes a sarcastic comment in front of friends. It stings. It was meant to be funny maybe, but it landed wrong. Do you blow up on her in public? No. Do you pretend it didn't bother you? Also no. You wait until you're alone, and then you say something like, "Hey, that joke you made earlier, it didn't feel good to me. I'm not okay with being talked to like that, even as a joke. That's not the tone I want in this relationship." Short, direct, no yelling, no guilt tripping, no emotional spirals, just a clear boundary. And if she respects you and wants to keep the connection healthy, she'll get it. She might be surprised, she might get defensive for a second, but deep down she'll respect you more because you respect yourself. Now, if she doesn't respond well, if she mocks you, gaslights you, or doubles down, then that tells you everything you need to know about where that relationship is headed. This isn't about controlling women or making them walk on eggshells. That's not the goal here. This is about setting mutual respect as the foundation of a relationship. Men need to be willing to lead, not through domination, but through strength, clarity, and emotional maturity. Women, in turn, need to feel that their man can handle them. Not just when things are good, but when there's friction, when emotions run high, when tests show up. Because here's the truth most people won't say out loud. A woman's love is a response. It's not automatic, it's not guaranteed, it's not unconditional. It's earned through consistency, leadership, and grounded presence. And if you as a man don't protect the conditions under which her love thrives, it will die out, quietly, slowly, until one day she's looking at you with indifference and you don't know how you got there. That's why nipping covert disrespect in the bud is not about ego. It's about preserving connection. It's about protecting the space where love can grow. Because when a woman does respect her man, when she feels his strength, his steadiness, his standards, then she can finally relax. She can finally exhale. She can let go of the reins and lean into her feminine, trusting that she's safe. And that's where the magic happens. That's when both people thrive.
So let's talk about this in practical terms. Let's say you're in a relationship and you're noticing these little red flags. The jokes that cut a little too deep, the eye rolls during disagreements, the sarcastic tone when you make a request, the subtle dismissal when you try to explain something. None of these seem like huge issues on their own, but over time they create a pattern, and that pattern begins to chip away at trust, attraction, and emotional safety. So, what can you do? How do you actually address covert disrespect without turning everything into a war? Let's break this down into a few key steps. Step 1. Recognize the pattern. The first step is simply being aware of what's happening. You need to be honest with yourself. Is the way you're being spoken to, treated, making you feel smaller, less significant, or constantly on edge? Is it playful banter or a subtle power play? It's easy to gaslight yourself here, to say, well, maybe I'm just being sensitive, or it's not that big a deal. But remember, you're allowed to want respect in your relationships. You're allowed to set a standard. So take a moment to notice, is this a one-time thing or a recurring theme? Step 2. Call it out early. Once you've spotted the pattern, you have to name it. The key here is not to wait until you're boiling over with frustration. Bring it up when you're calm, when it's just a spark and not a full-blown fire. Here's an example. Hey, earlier when you rolled your eyes while I was talking, it might not have seemed like a big deal, but it didn't sit right with me. I'd really appreciate it if we could avoid that kind of tone. Simple. Clear. No drama. You're not attacking. You're not accusing. You're just stating how a certain behavior made you feel and drawing a line around it. If you do this consistently, you're going to start shaping the emotional tone of your relationship. You're teaching the other person how to treat you. Step 3. Hold the line. This is where a lot of people stumble. They speak up once, maybe twice, but then they back down the moment they meet resistance. Maybe she laughs it off. Maybe she says, "You're being too sensitive." Maybe she gets defensive. And instead of staying grounded, you let it go again. But here's the thing. Boundaries don't mean anything if they're not enforced. So if the behavior continues, you need to raise the intensity, not emotionally, but in clarity. We've talked about this before. I really need to feel like I'm being spoken to with respect in this relationship. If that's something we can't agree on, then we have to reevaluate how we're doing this. Now, this isn't about being controlling. It's not about making threats or giving ultimatums. It's about communicating what your non-negotiables are. And if respect isn't a non-negotiable, then what is? Step 4. Observe the response. How someone reacts when you set a healthy boundary tells you everything you need to know. Does she listen? Does she reflect? Does she try to understand where you're coming from? Or does she deflect, blame you, make it all about her being misunderstood or just joking? Now, nobody's perfect. People get defensive. It happens. But over time, you should see a willingness to grow together, to meet each other halfway. If that's not happening, if every attempt to address disrespect turns into an argument, you're not in a safe emotional space. And no matter how much chemistry there is, no matter how good the physical connection might be, emotional safety is what sustains love over the long term. Let's flip the perspective for a second. For the women listening, maybe this is making you uncomfortable. Maybe you're thinking, well, men do disrespectful stuff too. And you're absolutely right. This dynamic isn't one-sided. Men can absolutely be dismissive, cold, sarcastic, controlling, you name it. But here's the distinction. When a man disrespects a woman, it damages her trust. It makes her feel unsafe, unseen, unloved. When a woman disrespects a man, it damages his sense of value in the relationship. It chips away at the respect he needs to feel like he's in a partnership, not a tug-of-war. The point here isn't to assign blame. It's to increase awareness, to help both sides understand what's happening underneath the surface when subtle behaviors go unchecked. Because when we're unaware, we start building relationships on resentment instead of respect. And that never ends well. A quick litmus test. Let's go back to a question we touched on earlier because it's really useful. Would you talk to your boss the way you talk to your partner? If your answer is no, then you've got to ask yourself, why does your boss get more courtesy, patience, or professionalism than the person you claim to love? Now, some people push back here. They say, well, that's different. My boss pays me. He's not in my personal life. Fair enough. But think about what that reveals. It means you understand the stakes in your professional life. You know there's a cost to being rude or dismissive or confrontational with your boss. So you adjust your behavior accordingly. So why wouldn't you do the same in a relationship where the cost is your partner's emotional connection, trust, and loyalty? That's the real question. Final thoughts. Disrespect, especially the subtle kind, doesn't usually show up out of nowhere. It's a process, a drift, a slow decline. But if you pay attention, if you catch it early and respond clearly, you can shift the dynamic. You can build a relationship where both people feel valued, heard, and respected. Not because everything is always perfect, not because there's never tension, but because you both agree. The foundation matters, the tone matters, and neither of you is willing to let small cracks turn into giant fractures. So, for the men listening, don't be afraid to set the tone. Don't be afraid to lead, not with force, but with clarity, steadiness, and emotional presence. And for the women listening, don't underestimate how powerful your words, your tone, and your energy can be in either lifting up or tearing down the man you love. Respect isn't about submission. It's about recognition. It's about choosing to honor each other's value, especially in moments when it's hardest to do so. Because at the end of the day, love without respect isn't sustainable. It's not real intimacy. It's not partnership. So let's do better together.